Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Vlad Costea, host of Bitcoin Takeover Podcast. Welcome to the show, Vlad.
Well, it's good to be here, really. It's an honor. How many people can claim that they have been on Keiser Report?
Oh, very few when you consider the total world population. Vlad, I want to talk about cypherpunks for a second. And you say that cypherpunks did 90% of Satoshi's work. So first of all, just kind of tell the audience what a cypherpunk is, and then exactly what work did they do for Satoshi. So kind of fill in some of the blanks there if you can.
So the cypherpunks are the people who identified as the cyberpunks who do, cipher stuff with cryptography. And in the 90s, they would meet up and develop all sorts of applications that would maximize their privacy. And you have the Cyberpunk manifesto that was published in 1992, I think. And you also have the book by Tim May, which is called the Cyphernomicon. So if you want to understand what they are about, then you should check out these two documents. And you don't have to read the whole Cyphernomicon, you just have to read the first page. And it says that in this debate between compliance to authoritarian laws and a greater amount of privacy, it's much more important to preserve individual freedom and human rights and privacy and everything else. But at the same time, there were two camps within the cypherpunk group. There was this side which was much more concerned with privacy and developing stuff. And I think Tor right now, which is a way to get more privacy on the internet, routing your connection, and also the VPN are kind of cypherpunk in spirit and in their ideals. And there was the other camp of cypherpunks, which was much more concerned with economics and money. And they wanted to basically end the Fed, to speak the jargon of this show. And that's what they attempted to do. I think to them, Bitcoin is like the holy grail, because for a long time, they tried to accomplish something which is totally decentralized and capable of providing individual freedom. And they have had many experiments, which start with David Chaum's Zcash. And I think that was in the early 90s, and it happened with the DigiCash Corporation. And David Chaum was even recorded by the CIA and the NSA, and they were discussing on their internal channels and stuff like that about the dangers that DigiCash can pose to global economy. And the project itself has failed because it wasn't trying to create a new cryptocurrency per se. It was just trying to move fiat money in a more private way. So in this sense, it was much more centralized and relied on central authority. And after David Chaum's experiments, we have seen Adam Back, who created Hashcash, and that was, I think, in 1997. And it was a way to prevent email spam at first. So that was the first purpose. But after that, Hal Finney has upgraded the protocol in 2004. And it's reusable proof of work. That's what it's called. And that actually laid the foundation for Bitcoin. And ideologically, if we think about it, BitGold, developed by Nick Szabo, is 90% of what Bitcoin is supposed to be, but has a different consensus system. Whereas in Bitcoin, it's all about the hash and the processing cycles that occur at a time, and that's what ensures the network security. In Szabo's design, it was all about the amount of computers and processors being connected. So it was susceptible to this type of Sybil attacks with a large majority of computers joining the network at one time and overtaking the 51% majority. And that could just destroy the system. So I think Satoshi Nakamoto has taken elements from all of these inventions that precede Bitcoin and has combined them in order to get something that fulfills that cypherpunk ideal of having absolute freedom. What Satoshi didn't manage to do was to provide more privacy, but there's a lot of experimentation in that right now.
Oh, that's an excellent little history of it all. Thank you. That was great. Vlad, you are a PhD candidate in political philosophy. So can you elaborate more on the political philosophy of Bitcoin? You'll make a connection there. How does its philosophy differ from our current fiat system run by central banks, Vlad?
It depends on the school of philosophy to which you refer when you talk about philosophy. Because if I talk to my supervisor, he's going to tell me that I'm some sort of anarchist, and he's going to associate me with something that is not necessarily from the school of philosophy that he teaches. But at the same time, I think that philosophically speaking, Bitcoin is very much close to what the founding fathers of the United States were envisioning. And by the founding fathers, I actually mean Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, as they were the ones who opposed the idea of having a central bank and just wanted to have silver and gold as the main currencies in the United States. So they wanted the kind of currency that is hard to get, actually. It takes resources to mine. You cannot just mint it out of thin air. And they wanted people to be free to hold them and hoard them and trade them however they want to. And that's not what Alexander Hamilton wanted, and that's how we ended up with a central bank in the United States and the dollar. And then in the early 20th century, we got the Fed, and that's the story. But also, I think economists who blend with philosophy, like Hayek and the whole school of Austrian economics, from Friedman to Rothbard, they all talk about this kind of stuff, and they envision a form of money that is not political, that cannot be controlled by a government, and is actually not necessarily decentralized, because that's kind of a computer science term, but is neutral and cannot be confiscated by a government, cannot be censored, and is basically something that you have and is yours, and you can transact with whoever you want. And that used to be the state of affairs in many countries, and that has changed, unfortunately. So, sorry, I started from philosophy, and I think if you want to fully grasp the economic philosophy of Bitcoin and what it's all about, you have to read both economics, so the Austrian school, but I don't necessarily agree with people who think that Bitcoin is an invention of the Austrian school, because it deals with computer science and it's not material, so you cannot hold a Bitcoin in your hand. And it's much more complex than that. If you fall down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you're going to have to study many fields like economics and computer science and cryptography and history of money. And I don't know, there is so much that you discover along the way. And the more you know and the more you find out, the more you're going to realize that you're just scratching the surface and there's always more. And that's why I haven't finished my thesis. And I'm in a big argument with my supervisor because I'm not happy with what I know, and I keep on discovering new stuff all the time. And he just wants me to finish it. He told me, just write something and get it done.
Well, we'll have to get him on the show and try to educate him right here on TV. That's the best solution for that. No, only kidding. But Vlad, so is this type of work that you're discussing, and you're talking about the founding of the United States, the philosophy behind it? You know, in the U.S., we're very big on separating church and state. With Bitcoin, you have the potential separation of state and money, which would be a quantum leap in individual sovereignty, as we say. And is this what has led to all the work that you do in the area of Bitcoin wallets and securing coins? So one of the big surges of Bitcoin adoption happened after the Cyprus bail-in of 2013, before the next wave of bail-ins happened, and that would be where instead of the government printing money for a lot of banks, they simply go into people's bank accounts and take money. What should those new to Bitcoin do in terms of securing their coins in a hardware wallet? Can you kind of walk us through that?
First of all, I just want to say that security in itself is a very hard field, and you can find lots of experts in the security who have studied computer science and have studied forensics and stuff like that. And they're not going to agree on very simple topics because they have different visions. And on my podcast, I was fortunate enough to have Peter Todd, and he is an early Bitcoiner and has been a Bitcoin core developer and is one of the smartest people I know. And he told me that he doesn't use any devices at all because he doesn't trust them. He just builds his own setup because he's technically capable to do so. But for the regular person, I mean, I have some hardware wallets here. I prepared them for the show, and you have all sorts of them. And I have to review them all. So you have the cold card, you have the keep key, you have the ledger, you have the Trezor, and they all have trade-offs. They have pros and cons and reasons to use one or the other. So if you want to find out more about hardware wallets, just look for Bitcoin Takeover podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, and you're going to find interviews with all the hardware wallet manufacturers, and they pretty much explain the trade-offs because they're kind of honest about it. They're open, so they tell you why you should buy their product and why you should not buy it. So if you want to make a well-informed decision, you should do that. But also, if you also are into security, you should get a metal plate to replace your paper wallet. So I recommend stuff like CryptoSteel or Billfodl. And it's basically a metal plate on which you write down your seed words. And if you're extra paranoid, you can use a Faraday bag. And now you know how difficult it is to do security in Bitcoin because there's always an extra threat to take into consideration.
Okay. Vlad, thanks so much for being on Keiser Report.
Okay.
Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser. I want to thank our guest, Vlad Costea. He's the host of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, it's Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.